brilliant mixed martial arts and sports, including basketball journalist from ESPN, Ariel Helwani, who's just outside New York at the moment. Ariel, a very good evening to you. How are you?
A very good evening to you. Please refer to me by my proper title, Gareth, the founder and CEO of Helwani Boxing, sweeping the nation, more real than Zuffa Boxing. 5 to 6 years, we'll be giving Matchroom and Frank Warren a run for their money. You heard it here first.
Fair enough. Well, I'd like to see you go toe-to-toe fisticuffs with Dylan Dennis for a start.
Come on. Easy work, Gareth. Come on.
Our radio listeners, because we're on video, won't have seen you just flicking the dust off your shoulder there, like in the way that you tell us you're going to deal with Dylan Dennis. These things tend to go down as charity fights in the end. I hope it's an exhibition, not a real fight.
Listen, have you seen my hands, Gareth? Have you seen the speed? Have you seen the ferocity? Have you seen the precision? Have you seen the power? What does that guy have? That guy can't even push someone and knock them down, let alone punch them and knock them down. Are you kidding me? The biggest troll in MMA. Let me tell you something. Any pay-per-view headlined by me, probably 500 to 1 million buys, right? 500,000 to 1 million buys. Any pay-per-view. You heard it here first. One of the biggest draws in the game. I'll save combat sports if I have to.
I think Sonic has been ironing himself onto you a little bit. But here's the truth. Here's one. I go back a few years. When I throw the head kick, baby, you run.
Listen, I will say something about your head kicks. Lethal, the dexterity, the flexibility is very impressive. I've always been impressed. Even in your heavier days, you never lost that dexterity, which I've always commended you for. So yes, you are right. And also, you're very quick. I don't think people give you enough credit for your quickness.
I love that little dig in your heavier days. I love that.
No. To me, that's actually a compliment to the fact that you've lost weight in your heavier. If trust me, if you were heavier today than you were back then, I certainly wouldn't have said in your heavier days. So it's a compliment as how far you've come.
Listen, this is getting a little bit like Curb Your Enthusiasm and Larry David. But look, it's lovely to have you on again. It's a very significant moment in the history of mixed martial arts. Actually, we're on the cusp of UFC 249. Aborted from April the 18th. We'd have been in there in New York together at that. They tried to take it to Tachi Palace, the Indian reservation, Native American Indian reservation in California. Disney executives, obviously the company you work for, Disney being the overarching mother company of ESPN, executive deciding it was the wrong thing to try and reschedule it at Tachi Palace in California. But we get a situation now. We are just hours away from 24 fighters going at it, having had really long swabs up, COVID-19 test swabs up their noses all week, pre-testing kits. They have pulled something off in Jackson, Florida. What's the reaction like in America? I know obviously you cover it for ESPN. ESPN covers it. They're televisual partners. What's the reaction like? It's almost the first sport to come back, Ariel.
Yeah, certainly North American sport. We've seen Korean baseball come back. That's gotten a lot of play here in America. But, I mean, there's a lot of excitement from the fans. Early on, I will say this. Early on, when this was becoming a reality, I did not feel 100% comfortable. I felt like it was a little too soon. And then I think part of our job as journalists is to serve the people. And you have to, pardon the pun, take the temperature of your audience. And I just found an overwhelming amount of excitement among the fans, wanting something to look forward to, wanting to perhaps have 6 hours of entertainment, to think about something else, to gamble, to do God knows what. And my approach had to change. My approach had to be like, I need to serve these people. I need to get on board. I need to get excited about it as well. And I could say that if the amount of media that I'm doing, let alone, Dana White or the fighters are doing, is any indication, there's a large interest in this because, as you said, it's the only game in town. And credit to the UFC, they put together a really good card. And one thing that I've campaigned for a long time is the fact that distance makes the heart grow fonder. sometimes too much of a good thing isn't a good thing. And the one thing that we don't have in combat sports is an off season. Now in boxing, you'll have long stretches between big fights and promoters aren't putting on as many events as the UFC. But the UFC is putting on 42 events a year, and those 10 off weeks are sprinkled throughout the year. So it really feels like they're going 52 weeks. This 2-month stretch has, I think, raised the excitement level going into this card because the fans are jonesing for it. So I think all these things combined have really made for a nice concoction for the promotion where you have a lot of buzz and excitement for the event.
Around my mainstream coverage, and as I've been in the mainstream media as much as I love dabbling in the growing social media as well for a long time. Mainstream media here is sitting back and looking and saying, okay, these are the guys that are taking as much precautions as they can, but these are the guys that are taking the risk for the reward. Yeah. And everyone's sitting back and waiting to see what's going to happen. How's the mainstream media in America outside the fans? Has anyone taken umbrage on it? I mean, Bob Arum has to a certain extent, but Oscar De La Hoya's praised it. What do you gauge from the mainstream media in America?
There's definitely been some criticism of it, but this analogy, I don't know if it will mean anything to you, but I'll explain it to you. Back in the day, maybe 20 or so years ago, there was a famous football coach named Dennis Green, football as in American football, and he was playing on Monday night, which is a marquee slot for American football.
This analogy on the last time you were on the show.
Okay, but this is it. This is exactly it. Now, the point, this is the best way that I could explain it.
But make the point because it's a good one.
The point is, he said at the press conference about another team that he almost beat that was much better. They are who we thought they were. In essence, we could have exposed these guys. We're better than these guys, but, we didn't do it. And I feel like the general reaction to this fight is, MMA is who we thought it was. Look, it's not. There's a reason why the Premier League or the NBA or Major League Baseball isn't coming back in May and are still very far away because they have to do a lot more to get the events on. They have to do a lot more to put the players on the field or on the court, etc. There's no Fighters Association. There's no board of governors. Dana White could do whatever he wants. And if you don't want to fight, he'll go to the next guy. It's a lot easier for him to make this happen. Let's just call it like it is. And so if he wants to make it happen, he can make it happen. And so I think that a lot of people view that as like, yeah, we knew that about MMA. We knew that about fight sports. If the NBA or the Premier League was playing this weekend, I could assure you it would be a much bigger deal because we all know about the steps and the hurdles that need to be overcome in order to put on those events. And so I don't think there's all that many people surprised. It's like, oh yeah, of course fight sports are first up.
No, it's because it's that whole thing, like you say, the man in the street, the woman in the street is asking themselves at the moment, we're being asked to stay at home, lock down, and social distance from people we love, people we want to see, our grandchildren, parents, whoever it may be. Whereas if soccer players came back or NBA players back, they're earning extraordinary amounts of money, and the money is part of it, people would say, and yet they can go shoulder to shoulder, they can tackle each other. So where's the inaccuracy in the world? But even in fight sports, there are inherent risks to these events, to these coming together of men and women who are going to fight each other the next 8 days, 72 fighters, if they all come through their weigh-ins and so on, about 72 anyway, if it's 12 on each card, who are taking inherent risks. When the lockdown eases, on Sunday, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, is going to say, we're going to ease over the next month, create more bubbles of people to be around, but don't mix outside that. But if you go back to work, I'm certain they'll say this, if you go back to work, it's your responsibility back to the workplace. Because if you can do your job from home, do it from home. Because presumably none of the fighters could pull the UFC up on corporate manslaughter if they die in this event, Wow,
way to get all dark and disturbed on us here, Gareth.
Well,
but no.
Look, the worst thing, I want it to succeed tonight. I want it to succeed on Wednesday and Saturday. We all do, because it will give a pivotal moment for other combat sports to come back. I don't want there to be a rash of tests that are positive for people because it will put them at risk. But if someone, let's say, the worst case scenario, and we talk about it sometimes. Thankfully, we've never had a death in front of us
Right.
in
No,
UFC.
it would be horrific for the sport. And look, when the fighters checked in, they had to do the swab test. They also had to do the antibody test. Now, the antibody test tells you within 10 to 15 minutes whether or not you've had it. The swab test will tell you if you have it. They also did the daily temperature checks. Now, the fighters got the results for their swab. No, excuse me. The fighters got the results for the antibody test, like I said, in minutes. As of us recording this, I didn't hear from it. They told them, we'll call you if you test positive for the swab test. I haven't talked to every single person on the ground in Jacksonville, but I've talked to enough. Not a single one has gotten that phone call. I'd love to know, where it's being tested, who's doing the testing. I'd love to see all the negative tests in front of me. I want to believe that this is being done the right way. I want to believe that, all the proper precautions are being taken. And, I have to say, I know it's in vogue to kick Conor McGregor when he's down, but I think Conor McGregor has done a phenomenal job over the past 2 months, including as recently as Thursday when I spoke to his manager, Adi Attar, and he said, look, they're talking about him coming back in July, but he's watching these three events closely, not for the results, but he wants to know if they're doing things the right way, if they have a plan in place, if they are taking the proper precautions. And then only if he feels reassured that this is healthy, he'll come back or he'll consider coming back. I haven't heard that kind of rhetoric from a lot of fighters right now. A lot of the fighters just want to fight, and I don't begrudge them. Obviously, Conor can stand to stay at home and can afford it for many, many years, and they can. But I think it's important for people like him to speak up and say, hold on, we're not going to jump right into this, right? I want to see the results of these tests. I want to see how this plays out. I want to see if the staff members and the fighters are safe. So there's a big bullseye on Dana White's back, and there's a lot of pressure because, yes, he's very confident, and that's been part of his MO. That's who he is. But if something happens, then there's going to be a lot to answer for.
Now, I've been very, very impressed by Conor McGregor during the pandemic lockdown. It's the most mature we've ever seen him. In fact, they were talking about him being president of Ireland a couple of days ago, weren't they? That he's been so good. Very, very good points, Ariel. It's great to hear because I hadn't heard anything either anywhere that there was anything negative about the testing. On a personal level, I was concerned about going. I'm still concerned about going to events, both for personal reasons and generic reasons. Boxing has a different model, so it can't create events like the UFC can. But if this is successful and pay-per-view works without an audience and they can put together the right kinds of cards, do you think that the UFC could actually really give the kickstart to loads of other sports to get moving?
I really do think those other major sports have their own systems in place, their own procedures. They have to answer to a lot. They have a lot more at risk. I mean, the Premier League isn't the UFC. The NBA isn't the UFC. And like I said, Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA, can't decide on Monday that we're back. It's just not going to happen. There's a whole process, and the players have to be on board, and the referees have to be on board, and the coaches have to be on board, and the owners have to be on board. There's so much that has to go into that, and it's like none of that is at play here. None of that is at play. It's literally Dana White saying, "Let's get 24 fighters, and let's load up the caravan, and here we go." And the same is the case, by the way, for Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren and whomever, Oscar De La Hoya. So. It's just fight sports are different, and this is one of the many reasons why they are different, and that's why I'm not surprised to see them come back first. I'm not surprised that PGA is coming back, NASCAR is coming back first. These are the ones that are going to come back first, and also wrestling has been, they don't have any kind of association, so, and then we'll start to see, I think, the major sporting leagues come back around the world.
Listen, it's always great to catch up with you. Finally, I know you don't predict, but you and I have both known Dominic Cruz a really long time. If he can get the UFC bantamweight title back against Henry Cejudo, who you'd have to say, even though he's only 2 years younger, the Olympic gold, there's progression in his career. He's slightly smaller physically in stature, but he's at the peak of his powers, you'd have to say, really. Is this one of the great comebacks in MMA if Dominic Cruz wins?
Oh, 100%. I mean, what a story, right? I mean, this guy in 2012, 19-1, tears his ACL before that Uriah Faber fight, is out for almost a year. The cadaver in his knee is rejected by his body, has to have another surgery, comes all the way back, tears his groin, comes all the way back, tears his ACL, now has shoulder surgery. I mean, it's absurd. And every time he comes back from the long layoff, he wins. He comes back from
in that time becomes one of the great MMA analysts.
Yeah. Comes back from the long layoff, beats Mizugaki. Comes back from the long layoff, beats TJ Dillashaw. Hasn't fought now in 3.5 years. To fight a guy like Cejudo, Olympic gold medalist at the time when he won in 2008, the youngest American Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling history. It's an unimaginable feat. And this is a guy who has said time and again that ring rust doesn't matter. Ring rust isn't a real thing. Cage rust is a myth. Well, he's coming back after 3.5 years on the sidelines, but also he's now in his mid-30s. And, father time and the hiatus, sometimes that's a tough concoction to overcome. So I'm really curious to see how he looks. To me, it's the most intriguing fight on the card because of the question mark surrounding him, right? How is this guy going to look? Can he really do it? If he could turn back the clock and shut up Henry Cejudo, and by the way, the backstory between them is great. They used to train together in Arizona as kids. It's just phenomenal stuff. I can't wait to see it.
And the final thing, presumably, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think the winner of the main event between Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, and I think Ferguson will own Gaethje in my view, even though Gaethje's got a bit more slippery and a little bit cleverer. I think Ferguson's on the next level. The winner of this fight for Conor McGregor?
I mean, the winner should really be for Khabib, right? The winner should be...
Conor is what I'm suggesting.
It could, yeah. He's very much in play. Yeah. I mean, look, Khabib is the prize because he's the champion, right? He should be the prize, but let's be honest, the bigger draw is Conor. Right?
As Conor says, I'm the bread.
He is. He said it in January, and he was right. They think I'm toast, but I'm still the bread, and he's right. He's the lottery ticket. Yeah. He is bigger than any title, and anyone who wants to deny that is just kidding themselves. So, yeah, the point is the winner of this fight holds some really good cards in his hands. The loser goes back down the bottom of the ladder.
Listen, have a great night. I'm sure you're doing loads on it live anyway from home. It's lovely to see you. Look really well. Stay well in the pandemic. And we'll catch you in a short while.
Thank you, Gareth. And I appreciate you having me on. And I know that every time you guys want to boost in the ratings, you call up your old friend Ariel. Don't think I don't notice this. And listen, if you...
Eddie Hearn, Tony Bellew, Michael Bisping, even Conor McGregor gets boostings from you these days.
That's right. Thank you, Gareth.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.